In the heart of the wilderness, where hope meets desperation, the Israelites' journey takes a divine turn, filled with trials, miracles, and profound revelations. Imagine the vast, arid landscapes stretching as far as the eye can see, the sun beating down mercilessly, and the parched throats of a multitude yearning for relief. This isn't just a journey through the wilderness, it's a journey through the wilderness of faith, a test of trust in divine providence. In the midst of this desolate scene, the Israelites grumbled, their bellies empty, their spirits low. They were free from the chains of Egyptian slavery, yes, but what good was freedom if it came with hunger and hardship? They found themselves questioning the very God who had delivered them. Would he abandon them now, in their hour of need? Yet, even in their despair, a glimmer of hope remained. Moses and Aaron, their leaders, stood steadfast, their faith unshaken. They held on to the promise that God had made to them, a promise of sustenance, of daily bread from heaven. They relayed this promise to the rest of the Israelites, asking them a crucial question. Would they trust in God's provision, or would they let their doubt consume them? This was the first of many tests that the Israelites would face in the wilderness. It was a test not just of their physical endurance, but of their spiritual mettle as well. Would they choose to rely on God, even when their circumstances seemed dire? Would they obey His commandments, even when it was difficult? As we reflect on this wilderness journey, we too are faced with these questions. In our own desolate landscapes, in our moments of hunger and despair, do we trust in God's provision? Do we obey His commandments? Or do we let our doubts and fears get the better of us? Surrounded by barren landscapes, the Israelites found themselves at the mercy of hunger and despair. But amidst their murmurs, a question arose. Will they trust in God's provision or succumb to doubt? With unwavering faith, Moses and Aaron relay God's promise of bread from heaven. Imagine, if you will, the scene. The Israelites, weary and hungry, are in the throes of despair. Yet in the midst of their tribulations, Moses and Aaron stand before them, echoing a divine promise. A promise of sustenance, of manna, from the skies. A divine provision that would quell their hunger and rekindle their dwindling hope. Now, the Israelites found themselves in an intriguing quandary. On one hand, there was the promise of divine provision, an assurance from God Almighty Himself. On the other hand, there was the harsh reality of their circumstances, the barren wilderness that offered no comfort, no assurance. A stark contrast, wouldn't you agree? Yet the promise of provision was not without conditions. Along with the manna came a test of obedience. God had decreed that the Israelites were to gather only enough manna for each day, and double the amount on the sixth day to prepare for the Sabbath, when no manna would fall. This divine commandment posed a new question to the Israelites. It was not only about trusting in God's provision, but also about adhering to His commandments. Would they follow the divine decree, or would they let their fears and doubts overrule their faith? As the manna descended from the heavens and the Israelites filled their baskets, their reactions varied. Some followed the divine decree to the letter, gathering just enough for each day, while others, driven by fear and doubt, attempted to hoard more. The promise of divine provision was indeed a test of faith and of obedience. It was a lesson that God's provision is not merely about satisfying our physical needs, but also about cultivating our spiritual growth. It's about learning to trust in His wisdom, to follow His commandments, and to live in harmony with His divine plan. But as the Israelites witness the miraculous provision, another question emerges. Will they heed God's commandments and honor the Sabbath? This question, dear listeners, is as relevant today as it was then. As we navigate our own wilderness, may we too learn to trust in divine provision and honor the divine commandments. As manna blankets the ground and quails fill the skies, the Israelites witnessed the power of divine provision. A spectacle of absolute wonder unfolds before their tired and hungry eyes. In this barren wasteland where life seems impossible, the impossible happens. Manna, a bread-like substance, covers the ground like dew at daybreak, and quails, a source of meat, descend upon the camp as the evening falls. It's a miracle, a testament to God's promise of sustenance and a demonstration of His love for His people. The Israelites, once gripped by hunger and despair, are now filled with awe and gratitude. They gather the manna, tasting its sweetness, a flavor likened to honey wafers. The quails, too, provide much-needed nourishment, a sign of God's unending provision. The people are fed, their physical needs met in a way that defies human comprehension. But this miracle is more than just about physical sustenance. It's an invitation to faithfulness and obedience. God commands the Israelites to gather only what they need for each day, trusting that He will provide anew each morning. On the sixth day, they are to gather twice as much, preparing for the Sabbath when no manna would appear. It's a test of trust, a call to honor the rhythm of work and rest that God Himself modeled in the creation narrative. And yet, despite this miraculous provision, some among the Israelites succumb to fear and hoard the manna, only to find it rotten the next morning. Their actions echo the question that resonates throughout this wilderness journey. Will they trust in God's promise? Will they remain faithful and obedient, even when abundance might tempt them to take matters into their own hands? Yet, amidst the abundance, a deeper question lingers. Will they remain faithful and obedient, even in times of plenty? For the Israelites, and for us today, the miracle of manna and quails challenges us to trust in divine provision, to honor God's commandments, and to live in faithful obedience, even when the wilderness beckons us to do otherwise. Despite God's warnings, some among the Israelites defy His commandments, seeking to gather manna on the Sabbath. This disobedience was not a simple oversight, but a deliberate choice to disregard the divine mandate. A handful of individuals, driven by fear, doubt, or perhaps a misplaced sense of self-sufficiency, decided to venture out on the day of rest in search of the heavenly bread. This act of defiance, however, did not go unnoticed by the all-seeing God. The manna they sought on the Sabbath was not to be found. Their baskets remained empty, their bellies unfilled. The divine provision that had blanketed the ground like dew every other morning was conspicuously absent on the Sabbath. But the consequences of their disobedience extended beyond physical hunger. Their spiritual well-being was also at stake. They had openly defied God's command, a clear breach of the trust and obedience that God sought from His chosen people. It was a stark reminder that disobedience to God's law brings not only physical consequences, but spiritual ramifications as well. This story of disobedience in the wilderness is not just a historical narrative. It is a timeless parable about the importance of faith and obedience in our relationship with God. It serves as a reminder that defiance of God's commandments can lead to spiritual emptiness, a void that cannot be filled by earthly means. So, what happens when we stray from God's path? We may find ourselves wandering aimlessly in a wilderness of our own making, devoid of spiritual nourishment and distant from the divine presence. Disobedience to God's commandments can lead to a spiritual famine, a hunger that cannot be satisfied by the bread of this world. But their actions invite consequences, prompting reflection. What happens when we stray from God's path and seek our own way? As we navigate the wilderness of life, may we remember the lessons from the Israelites' journey and seek to remain faithful and obedient to God's commandments. At Mount Sinai, amidst thunder and lightning, God reveals His divine law to Moses and the Israelites. As our journey brings us to the foot of Mount Sinai, the thunder roars and lightning illuminates the sky. In this awe-inspiring spectacle, God presents His divine law, transforming the Israelites' understanding of faith and obedience forever. The air is thick with anticipation as Moses ascends the mountain, and the people watch in silent reverence, their hearts pounding in unison with the thunderous echoes reverberating through the vast wilderness. On top of the mountain, shrouded in a cloud, Moses receives the 10 Commandments, the divine principles that will guide the Israelites in their relationship with God and one another. These laws, etched on stone tablets by the very finger of God, are a testament to his unchanging nature and his desire for a covenant relationship with his people. Back at the base of the mountain, the Israelites wait in a state of awe and reverence. The revelation of God's law is not just a moment of divine instruction, but a profound expression of God's love and care. He does not leave them to wander aimlessly in the wilderness of life. Instead, he provides them with a path to walk, a path of righteousness, justice, and love. Yet this revelation also brings forth a crucial question, one that pierces the heart of every Israelite and echoes through the ages. Will they, with their newly received divine law, choose to embrace God's commandments and walk in his ways? Will they uphold these laws not just on tablets of stone, but inscribe them on the tablets of their hearts? This question is not just for the Israelites at the foot of Mount Sinai, but for all of us who journey through the wilderness of life. Will we choose to embrace the divine commandments and walk in the ways of righteousness, justice, and love? In the midst of the spectacle, one question burns bright. Will they embrace God's commandments and walk in his ways?